Okay.
On the soup. You gotta figure out what's in it, how is it, what it looks like, you know. Just give it an example, it says, I said I'm getting one to use that from Mashiach. I said,
Vegetable soup. Vegetable soup.
Is it head pieces, does it not have pieces?
Okay. That's what we're going to do. We're going to go through the halachas, and afterwards we'll go to questions, because I'm sure everyone has their favorite soup and their composition of the soup, and we're going to go in a certain order, and hopefully at the end we'll address all kinds of soups, or at least some soups which I particularly don't like. I don't talk about but most soups.
The salads also the same.
Not going to get into salads right now. Going to soups. Let's focus, okay? No salads. But before we get to the soups, there's a couple of things that we didn't finish off last time, which is actually relevant to the subject. And that is just number one. Number one is that if you have a mixture of foods, and one is the main component, and the other is just there to season it, ikar and tafel. So halacha is, let's say you have noodles, and you have a few potatoes inside the noodle, let's say, and the main thing is the noodles. So halacha is that if these little potatoes are just there to season the noodles, then you make a bracha mazenis and exempts the potatoes. However, if you particularly like these potatoes, they're fried potatoes, they're good potatoes, so then it's better to say a bracha adam on the potatoes before you make a bracha on the noodles, and that way you don't automatically exempt them. We make a bracha on them. Questions later. Question. What? Right, that's true. In general, you go in the order of Maga Eish. That's right. However, in order to be able to do this midas chassidus, to do this attribute according to chassidus, like a bracha on the secondary thing, you skip the mazenis and you go to the adama in order to be able to say a bracha on the potatoes. Because if you go in the order, you say mazenis first, you won't be able to say a bracha adama on the potatoes. Therefore, we go against that rule. You're right. The usual rule is mazenis before hadama. But you skip the mazenis and go to the hadama in order to be able to say the bracha on the hadama. Now.
That's in the case where you got potato soup.
No soup. No, we didn't say any soup. We said noodles and potatoes. Okay. Now let's talk for a second about cereal. Let's talk about Cheerios and milk. Cheerios and milk, with solids and liquids, it works a little bit different than everything else. And you could make a bracha on the Cheerios first. And if you also like the milk is also important to you, you can make a bracha on the shahat on the milk afterwards. We don't say that the mezanis that you're making on the salad is not going to exempt the cereal, going to exempt the liquid, and therefore you can make a bracha mezanis first, and then shahat second on the milk, providing that they're both important to you, that you like them both. Just one caveat, which I have to say, which is, I think last time I mentioned what you like better. Doesn't always go by what you like better. It goes. There's something called ikar and something called chaviv. Ikar means it's the main ingredient. Chaviv means that you like it better. You might like those fried potatoes better, but the reason you're eating this is because you're eating noodles. You have to admit that this is the main thing that you're doing right now. And maybe you like the potatoes more, and that you're excited whenever you get into potato in the middle of your noodles. And there's a big yontiv, you hit a fried potato in the middle of the noodles, but you don't like the noodles so much. But what you're doing is you're eating noodles, and therefore just because it's chaviv, just because it's better for you, you like it better, doesn't make it the main component. And therefore, the halacha would be the bracha on the noodles exempts the potatoes. But the better thing to do is make a bracha on the potatoes first, and that way they won't be exempt. Okay. Now. That's if it's chaviv. If it's chaviv does not make it ikar. That's my point. Chaviv means you like it better. If you hate potatoes, if you hate them, and you're just suffering through them because you're having the noodles, then there's no hiddur. It's not considered a hiddur mitzvah to go have the potatoes first, make a bracha on it. Because the only reason why it's a hiddur is because you like it also. But if you don't like it at all, then you shouldn't skip the order of Maga Eish. You should go first the mazenis and then the adama. But if you like it also, if you like it better, then we say make a bracha on the adama first, on the potatoes first, and then go to the noodles. Okay. This is all just covering what we did last. Now let's get to okay. One more thing. Let's cover.
Rice, no?
Huh?
Similar to the rice.
The rice and the raisins.
You said no rice.
That's
another rice. That's not five rice.
Okay.
Adama and Shatan.
Let's talk about ice cream. Ice cream is much more geschmack than rice. Okay.
Yeah.
So although the Alter Rebbe is of the opinion that mezanis is always the main thing, and therefore it would seem if you have an ice cream cone, so the best thing to do would be to say a bracha on the you need to say a bracha on the cone also. You'd see making a bracha on the cone because the cone is mezanis. However, B'chaim Noah, who passes according to Alter Rebbe, he says that if it's a sawdust cone, it's not a tasty cone, you don't make any bracha at all on the cone, just shahakal on the ice cream, and that's it. However, if the cone is tasty as well, the cone has a flavor. So then, although we say maga eish, right, this was more than mozanis and then shahakal. No, you don't have to. You don't have to mess up your ice cream cone. Although it will be make your ice cream a lot more unpleasant and therefore may seem a lot more religious. You don't have to do that. You can bracha shahakal on the ice cream first, and then in the mozanis, because mozanis, since mozanis is a major component, it may exempt the ice cream. Therefore, the best thing to do is the way you got the ice cream, shahakal on the ice cream, and mezonos in the cone. The ice cream is the main thing. So even though halachically mezonos becomes the main thing, but still you should make a bracha shahakal on the ice cream first, because if you make a bracha on the cone first, you're going to run into a question whether that exempted the ice cream or not. So therefore, the order that you got the ice cream, the top is the ice cream, the bottom is the cone, which is the most enjoyable way to eat it. Also, you have to eat you're breaking up a piece of mezanos first because you have to go to mezanos and shakal. No, actually, Judaism isn't against enjoying ice cream, it seems. All right. Now, let's now go to soups. First of all, a vegetable soup. A vegetable soup is sort of like the spice of a food. What I mean is that the spice of the food is considered part of the food. So too with vegetable soup, that the soup is considered part of the vegetable. And therefore, it doesn't matter how the soup was prepared. It doesn't matter if it was pureed, if it was cut, if you could see pieces, you can't see pieces. A vegetable soup is always going to be hadam. It's a vegetable soup, a vegetable that is cooked to prepare. No shahakal whatsoever, just hadam. Only hadam. Hold on, that's not vegetable. That's a legume. One second. Hold on. Now, what if you cook the soup? What if you cook vegetables in borscht? You were cooking in vinegar. So then the borscht, the vinegar, is considered something important, and therefore you should also make a bracha on the borscht or on the vinegar, and it's not exempt with a bracha on the vegetables. But your order should be first make a bracha on the borscht, on the liquid, and then make a bracha on the vegetables. You don't want to exempt the soup.
Same as you had before, right?
But this is because the liquid is important here. Liquid's important because it's not just water. It's vinegar. It's borscht. Hold on. Now let's get the chicken soup. Now,
Sorry, before you go,
chicken
same principle that you said before, right?
what's this principle?
Make the bracha of the double.
You're going to exempt the soup. Therefore, same. Therefore, make a bracha shahakal first in the soup and then adam in the vegetables. Right. Otherwise, you may exempt the vegetables. Okay. Let's now go to the moment we've all been waiting for: chicken soup. So the halacha is that if you have a soup and the soup you cooked meat, so the bracha on the soup is going to be shahakal. What if you have in the soup not just meat, you also have vegetables? You have chicken and vegetables. You have carrots and vegetables, carrots and chicken in your soup. You have carrots and vegetables in your soup, in your carrots and chicken in your soup. The halacha is the main ingredient in the soup is the chicken. The chicken is considered the major ingredient, and therefore the bracha on the broth itself is not going to be adama. The bracha on the broth itself is going to be shahakal. Now, what if you want to eat the chicken and the vegetables and the soup together? So what's the bracha? So the halacha is it's complicated. The halacha is that it's complicated. What do you mean it's complicated? First of all, let's go with number one. Number one is you have to ask the question: what's the major? What is there more of? Is there more vegetables? Is there more chicken? If there are more, whatever there's more of, that's what the bracha should be on. So if there's more vegetables, make a bracha on the vegetables, more chicken, make a bracha on the chicken. That's what the bracha should be on if they are both cooked together with the soup. Why do I say it's complicated? It's complicated because, as we learned last time, there is an opinion which holds that the language of the Alter Rebbe is whenever you cook something together, it becomes one dish. So the question is, at what point does it become one dish? Does it become one dish just because you cook it together? Or does it become one dish only if it actually is becoming one thing? So let's say you have big pieces of chicken, and they're not going to all be, you have a whole piece of chicken in there. So you're not going to pick up with your spoon the chicken as well. It's a separate entity. And so therefore, although let's say the major component in the soup is the vegetables, there's more vegetables than chicken. Therefore, and we say you go by the majority, and therefore the bracha on the soup should be the bracha on the items in the soup are the bracha on the broth itself is shahakal. That we establish, because the main thing when you have chicken and you have vegetables, the bracha on the broth itself is shahakal. But now the question is, do you make a bracha on the meat or on the vegetables in the soup? Or are they included in the bracha? So do you make a bracha also on the vegetables? So the answer is that if the vegetables are the majority, you do make a bracha hadama on the vegetables. But the question is, does that also include the chicken or not? So some say
Okay, I'm sorry, back off.
the
You're saying you're making a double and not make shahakal.
you made a bracha adama, you're not making a bracha shahakal, but even though the broth itself is it's chicken soup, and the broth itself he says is shahakal because it's chicken soup. But let's say you're only eating the vegetables and the meat in the chicken, okay? In the chicken soup. You're only eating the vegetables and the chicken. You're not eating everything else. You just you took out of the soup, the chicken and the vegetables. You're not eating the soup, just the chicken and the vegetables. So the halacha is, the bracha is, you go by what's the majority? The majority is vegetables, you can bracha on the vegetables. But there are those that say that since the chicken is this big piece of chicken there, and not coming up on the same spoon with your vegetables, so there are those that say you cannot exempt the bracha on the chicken with the bracha on the vegetables, because they're not considered nullified the vegetables because they stand alone. You can't say just because the majority is the vegetables, therefore the bracha that includes the bracha on the chicken. Others say no. Others say that since the Alter Rebbe says it becomes one entity, so since you cook the vegetables and the chicken together, so you make a bracha on the vegetables and includes the chicken. Do not make a bracha on the chicken. That's the argument, and so there's an argument, and therefore obviously it'll be nice to have another piece of chocolate there in the middle, so you can bracha shahakal on the chocolate. You don't run into any issue. Okay, so that's when there's vegetables and chicken together. Oh, now let's say you have in the soup, you also have noodles. You have noodles and chicken and vegetables in the soup. So, first of all, the noodles were cooked together with the soup, let's say. They're more important now than the everything else, because they are, however, there could be two different ways the soup is made, even if there are noodles. One way is, forget about the halachic relevance of noodles being the main thing. Why did he make the soup? You could make, for example, you can make oatmeal. In oatmeal, whatever you put in there, the main thing is the oatmeal. You're eating oatmeal to satiate. But this is a chicken soup. It's not meant to satiate you because of the noodles. It's not like it's not like it's really the main component for you. The main component for you is it's a chicken soup. You're putting the noodles into it as well to season the chicken, make the chicken soup taste better. But it's not about the noodles. Even though there may be there are noodles there, noodles are a major component. So if in the example if you had oatmeal, clearly the bracha is going to be mezenis. Whatever else is there is included the bracha mezenis. Unless, of course, you have, again, going back to those two opinions, unless you have major pieces of things in your oatmeal which are not going to be picked up by your spoon, Then you'll have another opinion which says you can't exempt them with the bracha on the oatmeal. You with me or Yossi? We had a bracha on the oatmeal for a second. Let's quick get out of the soup. We'll go back to the soup in a second. We'll go to the oatmeal for a second. You have the oatmeal, and you have bananas, and you have all these kinds of stuff in your oatmeal. So the bracha, so the major component in your oatmeal is going to be the mezanis, the oatmeal. And you don't need to break a bracha on anything else. But another opinion will say, if there are big pieces of there's a banana there, you're not going to be able to pick up the whole banana with your spoon. Huh? She sautés them. Okay. So if it's a major piece, if it's a big piece, it's not going to go in your spoon. Then there is an opinion which says that you're stuck and you cannot exempt the bananas with the bracha on the oatmeal. Now let's go back to the soup.
So what do? You make the bracha first on the vegetable?
If you cooked it together, then you can't make a bracha on the vegetable before because it's all one entity. And so it's cooked together. You make a bracha, forget the vegetable. Or you take another vegetable that wasn't inside this thing. Separate. Then you could do that. You could eat another banana. But because the issue is, one opinion will say it's still exempt. One opinion will say it's still going to be exempt because no banana. That's inside right. If banana separate,
if the banana is not there, then for sure it's not exempt.
If the banana is not there, it's for sure not exempt.
Right. So you make it lasagna, and then make a banana.
Right. But if it was cooked together with it, there's an opinion which says that you make bracha, and even though it's a big banana, hold on. If it's cooked together, even though there's a big banana there, there's an opinion which says it's exempt. Another opinion says it's not exempt because you can't eat it in the same spoon. Okay. Now let's.
So the cooked together is the important part?
Yes. It's cooked.
So my wife sautés vegetables and then mixes it up.
We're going to get to Hold on. We're going to get to adding it later in a second.
Okay.
But adding it later, we're going to get to. But before we get to adding later, I went out of the soup and I want to go back inside the soup. Okay. So you have a soup which is not made to satiate like this oatmeal. It's just made to you're having soup, and you have noodles in your Shabbos soup. You have noodles there, and you have broth there. And what bracha do you make first? The answer is you bracha on the broth first, and then a bracha on the noodles. You don't want to exempt the soup with a bracha on the noodles. And therefore, in that situation, make a bracha on the soup and then the bracha on the noodles.
What about crouton on Shabbos? We talked about it.
You can say Shabbos usually you wash.
You have mezanis croutons, you have amaitzi croutons, mezanis croutons.
Shaf or crouton?
Interesting.
Oil.
What?
They're not cooked.
Why is it shakal? Made of grain.
Yeah.
It's mezanis.
So
The awesome croutons are mezanis, no? So you get bracha shahakal on the soup and then mezanis on the croutons. Okay. All right. What if you have a whole grain in your soup? Whole grain is not pieces of kernels of grain in your soup. So kernels of grain, they are hadama, and so what you want to do is you don't want to exempt these kernels. Since they are a major component of your soup, you make a bracha first on the soup, and then you make a bracha hadama on those kernels of grain. Okay. Now let's say getting back to legumes. I don't know the reason for this. I'm just telling you the way Rabbi Gadassi puts it in the Sefer. The way he says it is that if you have green beans, for example, and even if you are eating whole green beans together with your broth, the bracha is going to be hadam. However, if your intent is only for the soup and you have the legumes there just to season the soup, you only say shahakal, he says. You have green bean soup, no hadam, just shahakal. If you want the green beans, so then and you're eating and there's a broth of the green beans, then you make a bracha hadam, and that's the only bracha you make. If you're eating green beans and there's a broth of the green beans, you make a bracha just hadam and that's it. However, if you're having a soup and the green beans are just there to season the soup, you make only shahakal. So either making only hadam or only shahakal. If it's about the green beans, you're only making hadam. If it's about the soup, you're only making shahakal.
How do you define soup now? The stuff, let's take the stuff that he makes over here on Tuesdays. Most of the time it's so thick, it's going to be a dish.
Okay. Hold on 1 second. We'll go to Tuesday in a second. Now, let's go. Just make a conclusion of the three things we said so far.
Okay.
Number one, if you make a vegetable soup is always going to be Adam. Number one. Now, what if? Okay, before I go over the three things, I don't just to know a pea soup. There's different kinds of pea soup. If it's this is not Rabbi Gadassi, it's Rabbi Marlo in his sefer. Rabbi Marlo says that split pea soup is shahakol, whole pea soup is hadam. That's what he says over there. I wonder what?
Wow.
Yeah. If it's pureed, then it's shahakol. Yeah. Okay. Now, okay. If you cook the soup first and then you add stuff into it afterwards. Okay. Oh no, 1 second. Okay, 1 second. We'll go I'm sorry. First, three things. If you made vegetable soup, sadama. Number two, if you cooked in the soup fruits or legumes, but it's all about the soup. It's about you put fruits or whatever or legumes in there just because you want the soup to taste better. The shahakol on the soup exempts everything. So fruits and legumes which are cooked in the soup, you get fruit soup. Everything is shahakol. This food is also shahakol. Cook fruit or legumes to make a soup, it's going to be shahakol.
So like a compote. You know, that's salt, always the compote.
A compote is not exactly made for the liquid. You're making this for the liquid.
Okay, so that's the important.
This
is one you're making.
If you're making a liquid, you're putting there, you're cooking something to make a liquid. So then the food is nullified to liquid.
Ananas, there's no issue because it's Adama. Ananas. No. Ananas with the liquid and everything. So
What's ananas again?
ananas is Adama.
What is it?
Pineapple.
Pineapple. Yes, make a pineapple soup.
No, pineapple compote.
That's what it said. That's not a soup.
It's not a soup. Make a fruit soup just for the sake of fruit, for the sake of soup. It's shahakol. Now, if you have a little bit of noodles in a soup, then the bracha is first shahakol on the soup, then mazenis on the noodles. If you have a lot of noodles, like the traditional soups, have a lot of noodles in the soup, then the soup itself is mazenis. You make a bracha mazenis, and that's it. No shahakol. On traditional soup, you only make mazenis, no shahakol. Okay, now let's get to back in. If you
soup, you mean those cups.
You're thinking they're poison, and you can't make a bracha on them at all. Okay. All right. Anyways, now let's say you made a soup. And then afterwards, you added vegetables into the soup. So what's the main thing for you? That's the question. If you have a soup already, and then you added things to the soup.
I was asking about oats. Okay.
If your main intent is for the broth, you only say shahakol. If your main intent is for the food, you only say hadama. If you want both, they make a bracha first on the food and then on the broth. Like we said before about the cereal and the milk, that with the liquid and broth, one doesn't exempt the other.
Well, spaghetti and
No, let's get your question now. Let's go to your question. Go to your question. You ask the question. You have oatmeal.
Saute vegetables on the side,
and then you put them into the thing.
Put it into the oats.
So let me think a second. Yeah, so the ikar for sure, the main thing is for sure the mazenis. So this is a classic example of making a bracha on the secondary thing first. Make a bracha adam on the first, and then you make a bracha mazenis. You technically, if you add it afterwards and you make a bracha and you make a bracha mazenis, it's automatically exempted. But here at Midas Chassidus, it's better to take a bracha on the thing first, and then make a bracha mazenis. Okay. What's your question? Spaghetti and meatballs. What's the main thing? Spaghetti and meatballs. What's the major? What is there more of? Is there more meatballs? Is there more spaghetti?
there's more spaghetti.
There's more
There's
spaghetti.
more spaghetti, but I don't know if that's the equal. If you go around and ask it, I don't know. It's a good question. And I think it would be maybe the difference.
And they were cooked together.
Yeah.
They're cooked together. And spaghetti and meatballs together cooked together. So if they're cooked together and they're taking with one spoon, pick it up with one spoon. If you pick it up with one spoon, So then make a bracha mazenis and exempts the spaghetti.
And they're not cooked together. The meatballs separate.
If the meatballs are separate and then you mix them together, and you want it, and the main thing for you is what was there more of? There's more of spaghetti, more meatballs.
Or there's,
Usually spaghetti, no?
I think it's more meat. Depends if you take.
So then it ma-
meatballs with a lot of spaghetti.
Okay, even if you say the meatballs are exempted by the spaghetti, but since it's noticeable, it's better to take a bracha shahakal on the meatballs before you take a bracha mazenis. So, and don't exempt don't exempt the meatballs with the spaghetti. But if you cook them together, then the pashtus, the bracha is mazenis, because it's one thing, and the main thing is the mazenis. All right, Chazak Baruch.